Not the at least time. What is the at most time? Because I feel like in the brainstorming session, and this is where developers, I feel a lot of creatives lack the business senses where they don't really look at the market, the timing of things, other entertainment mediums of when the rough release date is, so that when they coincide with that, it actually makes sense. Like the general public is prepared for a game like such as yours, whatever genre it is. And I feel like someone like you yourself or a PR firm has a firmer idea of the market to actually help develop an idea that makes sense 2 years from now. When is it too early to actually approach with a rough like one line or one page summary to kind of get the consultations like, hey, I'm thinking like this. You guys know the market better than I do. Is this something viable 2 years from now, according to your background?
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's ever too early for that initial piece of advice. I don't think it's ever too early for that. I think that's not to say that, just because you get some advice, you should take it, because, advice is free for a reason sometimes. But I think that, it's worth educating yourself about the market. It's worth educating yourself about what other people think about it. And so, having it straight away before you even get into the nitty gritty of the game is always worth having that initial conversation, because, you maybe develop, because there's so many indies that like get developed and it's like, why did you make this now? Like that whole trend is over. Like they come at it like a year or two late, because they started on the tail end of it. And I think, if you have that conversation very, very early on, before you've really built out your game, it gives you the time, if needed, to, if you look at the market and say there's not going to be a market for this in 2 years, it gives you the time to pivot before you've got yourself knee deep and tens of thousands of dollars into it.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of leads me to another question, like maybe a few years ago, and I hear this a lot with friends or at least on the other side of the table who are part of like investment firms. We're looking at games, and we're dear friends with Steve Gaynor. I worked with them a long time ago, and Gone Home was one of those things that indie teams would pitch as like, this is like Gone Home, but for this. And most of it is because it's a viable product for a small team to make. It's a 2-3 hour experience of compelling storytelling. But as of late, those type of games are, like you said, that trend is gone. Like people want to invest in a community, not into a 2-hour game that costs $20, and it's just not unless you're like really groundbreaking in some way where you're like No Man's Sky is not a 2-hour game, but something that is so compelling that you have to play, like The Witness or something, right? Those games are just not viable for the market anymore. In your experience, like these people who have a dream of telling a story as straightforward as a single narrative gameplay, is there a place for them anymore, or are you? Is there a way that they can adapt it with the market trends to make it viable again? Because there's still a really good place. Like I myself and still enjoy those type of games, but like you said, it's just a different audience. That might not be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's still an audience, and I think there's still an audience. I think those games can still sell well, right? The biggest issue is there an audience? I think you can always find an audience. It's especially with narrative games that are short and very concise. The biggest issue is presentation and execution. And the brutally honest fact is that the majority of developers who try these type of games do not get either of those two right. And so, if you don't get, if you're making like a 3-hour game that is very narrative focused and you don't get the presentation and execution right, that is the fundamental thing of what is going to be interesting to people. And so you've got like one of the core pillars of the game instantly wrong. And it's one of those things that it's very difficult to gauge from, I suppose, from a game developer perspective, because you're coming in it going, I want to do this. I think this is a good idea. But one of the things that I think developers don't ask themselves enough is, why do I think this is a good idea? And I think that's the big problem. Like they go, I like this, so I'm going to do this, versus why do I think this is going to, why do I think people are going to like this? What evidence, what ideas, what thoughts are behind this? Where's the proof of people are going to like this art style that I like? And if your answer is, well, someone else did it, then that's not a good answer. One of the things that I always tell indie developers when they come to me very early on is, don't look at another indie success and try and replicate that, because that's not a path to success. Because you can't, if it was as easy as looking at what someone else did and then replicating that, everybody would be successful and I would be out of a job. It's about, I would suggest looking and studying failures and seeing why other games failed. That provides much more valuable insight into what to do and how to go forward than something like looking at Gone Home and going, oh, that was successful. Why was it successful? Because you're never going to replicate those things. And so that's the best way to approach it, is to really think through how you're going to execute.